Professor Leanne Torr. I'm coming to you from Sydney, Australia, and I'm the chair of the special interest group for IBIA, which is called the Social Cognition, Communication and Affect Special Interest Group. And we have a very active, vibrant group, which is one of the many special interest groups of IBIA. And this is our second webinar that we're holding this year, 2 of 3 that we'll have in 2023. I'm very pleased to be able to introduce Dr. Liz Brunner to you this morning. Liz is an early career researcher. She's a certified practicing speech pathologist, and she has over 20 years experience working with adults with swallowing and communication difficulties. Her clinical and research expertise is in acquired neurological communication disorders, and her research experience and collaborations extend across quite broad interdisciplinary health contexts. She's got many wonderful skills. She's an excellent qualitative researcher. She's done a lot of qualitative and quantitatively driven social media research. She also does digital health mixed methods research, and she's been invited to speak on these topics quite a bit in the last couple of years. So I'm very pleased that Liz will be speaking to us. She's part of our Acquired Brain Injury Communication Lab at the University of Sydney here in Australia. And she's going to be speaking to us today about social media and how we can use that in the rehabilitation of people with acquired brain injury, which is, I'm sure you'll find it very interesting. We do have a Q&A time at the end of Liz's talk. So we ask you that you put questions in the chat, and I'm happy to moderate that at the end of Liz's talk this morning. So I'll hand over to Liz.
Thanks, Leanne. Hopefully those slides have popped up for you beautifully on the screen.
Yeah, it's very good.
Lovely. It's really nice to be here. I do quite like talking about this stuff, so any opportunity to do so, I grab onto it. So hopefully I'll be able to share a little bit with you about why I think working on social media is pretty darn important. But before I start, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you from unceded Ku-ring-gai lands in Australia, Sydney, Australia today. And I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional owners and custodians of these lands here, really recognising their continuing connection to the lands, water and culture, paying my respects to their elders past and present. There's so much going on in the world at the moment that I feel that we can really learn from their thousands of years of being connected to country and mob, and the fact that they're continuously working for unity. So I'd also really like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country on which you're on and pay respects to their elders as well. Full disclosure, I'm a full-time employee in the School of Health Sciences in the Faculty of Medicine and Health at the University of Sydney. And I was part of the team that developed Social Ability, but I received no financial benefit from the program whatsoever. And so in this session, I'm going to be sharing with you the benefits and risks of online social relationships and social media use after a brain injury. And I'll be kind of giving you some evidence about the approaches and strategies to support social media communication skills training. And I'll be talking you through a bespoke online program that can be used to support people with brain injury to use social media enjoyably and also safely. So as we know, an acquired brain injury is really, really sudden, can be extremely traumatic, and the changes that occur afterwards can really affect a person's cognition and how they communicate and how they navigate their relationships. And so within a year, most people have lost many of their friends, and the remaining relationships that they have can be really quite strained. And so my main focus in rehab would be to support people to build their social communication skills with different people and in different places. And these days, one of the places that I feel we really need to consider is social media. The number of active social media users continues to grow each year, as you can see here. And at the moment, around 60% of the world's population use social media actively. And each person who's using social media have an average of 7 different social media platforms that they're active on, or at least have accounts in. So just what is social media? And there's actually quite a few definitions in the literature, but all of them agree that social media is software that allows people to create and exchange content, and this is called user-generated content. It allows people to collaborate online and build up communities, and it enables lots of sharing through different types of networks. And so I quite like the Kaplan and Heinlein breakdown of the range of social media into 6 different categories. And so first of all, there's blogs like WordPress and collaborative projects like Wikipedia, and they're mostly text-based, and they kind of only really allow for pretty simple exchange between people. Then there's social networking sites like Facebook and Twitter, or X, and content communities like YouTube. And so there's text-based communication in these sites, but they also really enable and encourage the sharing of pictures and videos and other types of media. And there's a lot more interaction between the users. And lastly, there's social worlds like Second Life or Sims, and virtual game worlds like World of Warcraft, Fortnite, Stardew Valley, and they try to replicate face-to-face interactions, but it's more in that virtual environment. And so there's lots of advantages to using social media, and we know that it can create connections and can be used for entertainment, but it's also a huge source of information and news, and it can be really wonderful in terms of sharing info or advocating for greater awareness, particularly for health. And the number one reason that people use social media at the moment is to actually stay connected. So, using social media might really benefit people who have an acquired brain injury in terms of providing them with opportunities for social participation and just being included. However, in my PhD research, we found that people with an acquired brain injury can really find social media challenging to use well and safely. So in terms of cognitive communication, there's many different examples that we might observe in in-person interactions after a brain injury that also influence online interactions. This is not a complete list, but I just wanted to give you a few examples. So, for example, if someone has difficulty with attention, they can get easily distracted. We might see this in someone might start responding to a post or replying to a comment, but they get distracted and they end up sending an incomplete response or something that's really illegible, and that can lead to miscommunication. If someone has difficulty with managing their feelings and emotions, that could be seen in terms of feeling really overloaded by the amount of information that's coming to them in their posts, in their timeline, on their social media platforms, or they might be feeling really overwhelmed because they're seeing lots of negative or sad posts, which certainly can be the case in today's current climate. If they have some difficulties with impulse control, they may have difficulty stopping before acting in social media as well. So this could be seen in accepting absolutely every friend request that they receive, or posting or commenting on something before thinking about what they've said, what they're saying, and the potential repercussions of what they've said. Or they could be really, highly dominant in conversation and overshare, or be really tangential. So some of the things that we see in in-person conversations, we can certainly see replicated in online spaces as well. So during my PhD, I did a variety of mixed method studies to really explore how people with traumatic brain injury use social media, and to get a sense of what's happening and what resources might be needed, not only for people with brain injury, but also for us as rehab clinicians, so that we can support social media use after brain injury for communication and connection. And when I started, there was not very much research involving people with a brain injury. And most of it was really focused on the risks and barriers. And we didn't really know much about what could facilitate the use of social media, or actually even the experiences of people who had a brain injury. And so I conducted a second systematic review and looked at how technology itself more broadly was used during rehab after a brain injury. And I found that there was multiple factors that influenced successful use of technology in rehab. And so I developed this model to inform clinical practice, and really it identifies all of the different factors, but it emphasizes that using technology in rehab is multifaceted. It's really complex, and these factors are likely to be different for each individual, and they're also likely to change over time. I then really wanted to understand what conversations were happening just broadly about brain injury in social media. So at the time, this was called Twitter still, and it was still 140 characters. So we're going back a few years now, but I collected over 50,000 TBI related tweets across a 1 month period. And I ended up analysing about 29,000 tweets that were related to brain injury in that month. And I found that Twitter was used for a wide range of purposes, and a large number of Twitter users to talk about brain injury. And over 200 of the people who were tweeting during that month shared that they had a brain injury and expressed feelings of frustration and vulnerability, their trauma, but also acceptance and lots of generosity. And so the findings really told me that Twitter could help people with a brain injury to find TBI-related information, but also to connect with others who had a brain injury. And so then I interviewed people who had had a brain injury about their use of social media broadly, and found that of the 13 people I spoke to, all but one of them used more than one platform, and they use them every day in some way. But none of them had sort of received any support to use them, aside from sometimes getting some assistance in setting up their account for the first time. And so they kind of all learnt to use social media through a trial and error approach. And they reported some difficulties with cognitive fatigue in particular, but also around understanding the concepts of using and navigating the different platforms. I then recruited 6 people who used Twitter in particular and asked to sort of look at their tweets. And I collected and studied around 6,000 tweets. And the people that were sending these really ranged from novice tweeters who mostly lurked and watched other people, to some who were really expert and prolific tweeters. And they tweeted about a whole range of topics, as you can see here. The participants kind of underutilized Twitter to interact in conversations or to write about their experiences in very similar patterns to what I'd found in the larger hashtag study. And so this was really kind of suggesting to me that even if someone with a brain injury knows the basics of how to tweet or how to send a post and wants to use a social media platform more, knowing who to connect with and having some access to support is likely going to influence their use of a platform. Using their tweet data analysis, I actually then interviewed these 6 people about their Twitter use and their experiences. And so when I was talking with the more prolific tweeters, even though they tweeted a lot, they weren't necessarily strategic And the people who were more novice and lurked and watched really struggled because they didn't have support and they weren't sure what to do and how to go about it. But regardless of their skill level, that sense of connection really helped them to feel engaged and participate in more meaningful conversations. And so they really wanted to use the platform for connection, to be included and to communicate generally. Again, they learned how to use Twitter through trial and error, and they wanted to grow their connections, but they were really unsure how to do that. So I had a bit of an idea about what people with a traumatic brain injury experienced, but then I kind of wanted to know, well, what do health professionals experience? And I conducted 2 focus groups with health professionals working in a rehab organisation here in Australia that offered both inpatient and outpatient brain injury rehabilitation services. And these rehab professionals discussed their concerns about vulnerability in social media, risks of exploitation and reputation management for people wanting to use social media after their brain injury. And they really saw that their role was to protect people from harm. And that was either done through imposing restrictions on their social media use, or they would address problems as they happened. But they really wanted to be more proactive. They wanted guidance on how to address social media during rehabilitation. Most of them weren't really active social media users themselves. And so it was clear that supports were required to guide clinical practice. And so at the end of my PhD, I kind of conducted a metasynthesis to really bring together all of that evidence that I'd collated across all the different levels. And I identified these 5 guiding concepts that we could really use to kind of guide our clinical practice, I suppose, and developed an evidence-based protocol in this AJSLP paper so that as rehab professionals, we can be more proactive and really work with people to develop person-centered goals that address social communication in these digital contexts. So I, in this paper, suggest some facilitators of social media use to address during rehab. And so for each concept, I thought I'd pull out a facilitator out of the protocol for you to see. So, for example, when thinking about purpose for using social media, it's really important to just simply identify the digital systems that are personally meaningful for the individual. So, for example, I have multiple accounts in different platforms, but I probably prefer to use 1 or 2 more than the others. So, for example, I have a Facebook account, but I really don't use it for much other than to stay connected with some family and very old friends. Whereas, I use Instagram and Twitter or X way more regularly and engage with lots more people in those platforms. So they would be more meaningful for me. So a suggested strategy would be simply to discuss and document which social media platforms a person uses, which ones they prefer to use, and also then look at which platforms why they prefer to use those platforms, and think about which platforms they may want to use in the future, because their preferences might change. They may want to start in a new platform and create a new identity there. If we look at networks, if we're wanting to support their inclusion, because connection was a really big motivator for people, a good strategy is just to start by discussing their online social networks. Map out their connections. Who do they communicate with regularly, or who did they used to interact with? And talk about who they want to connect with now and into the future. So these facilitators are really just there to guide these conversations. And so my PhD research provided a bit of a roadmap for lots of different avenues of inquiry in terms of the use of social media after a brain injury. And I've been lucky enough to keep working in this space in the ABI Communication Lab, really to strengthen our knowledge on how to support people with a brain injury in using social media. And so we've been working on a whole range of things, and I'm going to talk you through some of them. So when I started working in the lab, we really wanted to know if there was any training already out there that could guide both people with brain injuries and also their rehab teams to build social media communication skills. So we conducted this scoping review and really focused on the key issues that should be addressed in social media training for people with a brain injury. I've put the link and a QR code for most of the papers that I talk about in here, so hopefully you'll be able to access them easily. And in this review, we really identified that there was a need for interactive training that's co-designed, that's safe, but also that incorporates really practical components to support people with a brain injury. And the training should really address aspects of how to use social media, social participation, personal and professional use, but also definitely cyber safety and well-being. But we didn't find any social media training resources that were immediately accessible or relevant for people with a brain injury. And so this led to the start of Social Ability. And this has been part of a larger project that we've been working on, the Social Brain Toolkit, which is a suite of online tools that we've developed in the lab here through a process of collaborative design in partnership with iCare and UTS, Change and Ears, and Brain Injury Australia. And so we collaboratively designed Social Ability, and this process was led by my colleague, Dr. Petra Avramovic, in her doctoral work, where she asked people with brain injury and other key stakeholders to give us feedback on what they thought should be included in the training and also how it should be presented. And initially, we asked about course accessibility, the content, the format, and what they felt were key priorities. And we incorporated their suggestions into designing a prototype. And we showed them these prototype ideas and got further guidance and feedback before we moved further. And so we could really refine it according to their guidance. Once we'd gotten that prototype, we then ran a pilot study with 4 people with a brain injury who tested out that prototype for us. And overall, they thought it was really a valuable resource. And one participant said, the premise of the course is a really good thing. And another person you can see here said, I reckon to other people who had a brain injury like me, I really benefit so many things from it. So they found the program was acceptable, engaging, functional, and accessible. But they also gave us invaluable feedback on what they thought didn't work. And we used that feedback to further refine the program before moving on to the next phase of testing. There was no change in how frequently they use social media, but their confidence in using social media improved, and they reported being more aware of how and who they interacted with in social media. So we refined the prototype a little further after that to be what it is today. So I thought I'd kind of talk you through the program so you can see what it's all about and what it offers. And so Social Ability is a free online resource. It's designed to be self-guided for a person with a brain injury to work through themselves, but they can also do this with a family member, a friend, a support worker, or a clinician. And the idea is to learn about using social media, connecting with other people, and staying safe while doing that. And so the whole program itself, depending on the person, takes around 2 to 3 hours to work through. it has these 4 modules. So what is social media, staying safe, how do I use it, and who can I connect with? And we've really tried to use metacognitive principles to support people to make a plan for using social media in a way that works for them. Really giving them ideas on how to stay safe when using social media. And even though there's a specific module here on staying safe, cyber safety is actually threaded throughout the 4 modules, because that was one of the really big priorities for all of our stakeholders, was that safety was a key element that needed to be reinforced. And the modules have been designed so it provides opportunities to learn about connecting with others. So really promoting the idea of finding social media buddies or teams so that they can build a network of support. In the modules, there's a combination of simple written information, and we've tried to incorporate lots of white space, simple graphics to really support understanding. And we've incorporated some simple accessibility features. So there's these little red buttons here, so people can change the font size or the contrast of the screen. There's also videos threaded throughout. And for each of the videos that's in the program, we provide a written transcript and also a summary for people to access. And so I don't have time to play you one of the videos, but I thought I'd give you a little taste of one of them. And these are some screenshots of a video, which is in the How Do I Use Social Media module. And this really prompts people to think about how much time they spend using social media and gives them some tips on making social media work for them instead of the other way around. There's also questions for people to work through, and most of these are centered around really practical examples of social media use. And so this one's an example from the Staying Safe module. And so you can see here it's not always easy to know how to respond. One way you could calm down the situation in the previous question could be to comment on the post and let everyone know it wasn't true. So there's always that feedback of, okay, this is what's happened. Now here's a new picture. And a troll's tagged someone they don't know in a post, and they share the profile photo and say, ugly, check out this one. Not sure why they have an Insta account. And it really prompts people to kind of think about, if someone did this to you, how would it make you feel? So, you know, there's lots of options for them to choose in terms of happy or sad or worried or relaxed, so that they can really think about how they would be feeling if someone said this about them. And it's aimed at both those who might be vulnerable to receiving online hate and abuse, as well as those who have a brain injury who might perpetrate this online abuse as well. There's also a printable worksheet for people to write down and keep the key messages of the 4 modules to really support memory. And there's prompts throughout the program to use the worksheet, like the visual on the screen at the moment. So people can work through the program in their own time. They can choose which modules to do and when. They can save their progress and come back to it later and get a certificate once they've completed the entire program, if they'd like to. So once we'd kind of gotten this prototype sorted, we also kind of wanted to know if adding in practice and some peer support elements changed outcomes for people. And so we ran a pilot study where we combined the use of the social ability program with a social media practice group. And we used a mixed methods pre-post intervention design to evaluate this, where we got people with brain injury to access and use the social ability program. We encouraged them to complete it. That was up to them. And they were also invited to join a private moderated Facebook group to practice their communication skills and communication over a 12-week period. And the whole idea of the Facebook group was really to encourage our participants to be involved and engage and connect through giving them opportunities to practice their social media communication skills in a really safe and supported way. We used Facebook because in groups, you don't actually have to be friends with one another. You just have to be invited to the group. And we also spoke to all of our participants about whether they wanted to use their regular Facebook account or whether they would like some help to set up a separate account so that they could keep their anonymity if they would prefer to. And we actually had one of our participants that had already been doing that. They had their individual account and they also had an account that they used to interact with brain injury support groups. So that was really interesting to know as well. We developed kind of a 12-week program of topics. You can see some of the ideas here. And this included, a combination of conversation starters and practical reminders and things like that. But at least one post a week across the 12 weeks focused on either a social media function, so how to use something or how to do something, or a safety related topic. And we had 2 groups and we had 16 people complete the 12-week intervention. We were lucky enough to have a moderator from Brain Injury Australia join myself and Dr. Rachel Reedake to moderate these Facebook groups. And we collected quite a lot of data across several aspects of their social media knowledge, their use and enjoyment, and also quality of life at pre-intervention, post-intervention, and 3 months after they finished the intervention. So in terms of social media skills, after 3 months of being in the group, 9 out of the 16 people showed an increase in their knowledge of cyber scams, and 11 were able to give more specific advice about what they do in response to a romance cyber scam, which was lovely. 5 out of the 16 participants showed an increase in their knowledge of hashtags and what they actually were, and 7 people were able to generate more hashtags themselves. 3 months after the group finished, 15 people had maintained their knowledge of cyber scams and 13 had maintained their knowledge of hashtags. And like our really small pilot with the prototype, these people didn't have big changes in how often they used Facebook. However, there were significant improvements in their confidence in using Facebook, and also their enjoyment in using it to connect with other people like themselves. There was no reported change in quality of life. However, the participants reported multiple benefits from being involved in the intervention. So we've got some preliminary evidence of some benefit. 2 people, the people in both groups recommended that others in the program should give it a go. You can see, give it a go, 100%, give it a go. And across the 2 groups, 50% said that they found that it was either very or extremely useful to them. Last year, we were actually also really pleased to be able to run a 3rd group, but this was a group with a bit of a difference in that it was peer moderated by 2 people with an acquired brain injury. So we actually invited 2 people from our first groups to join us as co-investigators, and they helped us redesign the group topics and how it was going to be run, and they moderated the group for 8 weeks. And it was really interesting to see that process unfold and be involved with them in and discuss the positives and negatives in this space. So we're in the process of analysing the outcomes and interviews from this study in collaboration with those peer moderators, and so we're hopeful that we'll be able to get our results out very soon. So watch this space. But I'm kind of really excited that we're able to have offer social ability as a free resource. It's due definitely because of the funding that we were able to access through iCare New South Wales. So extremely thankful for that. But it means that people can sign up for this for free and work through it. And hopefully both people with brain injury and also clinicians can use it to guide and support social media use after a brain injury. The other resource that I'd really like to bring your attention to is the cyber ability training. And this has been developed at Monash Uni here in Australia and led by Dr. Kate Gould. And this has been developed in collaboration with people who have a brain injury who actually have been scammed online themselves. And so this is a resource that can really support people with a brain injury to learn specifically about online scams and to build their cyber ability. So you can see there's these 8 topics ranging from what is a scam to, you know, tips for improving your cyber ability and safety online and how to stop a scam, but also finding some silver linings when things do go wrong, trying to find those positives from the negatives as well. So this has kind of been a really long ongoing process of building these social ability resources. You can see, you know, we've moved from my PhD research to building and piloting something small, but we're also starting right at this moment the development of an online social media communication assessment tool, and then fingers crossed, we'll move on to co-designing a clinician-directed intervention program and figuring out what that might look like and whether it's effective or not. But I think there's just huge potential for this work to be adapted to other people that we might interact with clinically in terms of those who have a communication disability. So potentially people with dementia or young people with developmental language disability or autism. There's definitely lots of scope for how we can build from these resources to support others in communicating online and doing it well and doing it safely. So I've included here links, information to all of my PhD research, and all of these latest publications are open access, so they're freely available. But if you have difficulty accessing any of these publications, I am very happy to receive a request and we'll send that out to you. But I'm hopeful that I've enticed everyone to think about how we can use social media a little bit more in our clinical practice. It's just one extra thing to think about. It shouldn't be scary. And hopefully it's got you thinking about how you use social media as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Liz. Just an amazing body of work. It's just, you can just see how it's been so methodically and rigorously developed over, you know, a number of years now. But it's yeah, very, very impressive. And I love listening to just the progress that you're making. And I've been on X tweeting about your work this morning. So yeah, it's kind of like this work in action. So we do have time for questions now, and I see Nicole has put her video on, but perhaps you'd like to actually ask the question in person, Nicole, rather than me reading it out.
Yes, I would love to. Thank you so much, Liz, for sharing that. It's so overwhelming to see just the breadth of it, what feels like a life journey. And I know how hard doing qualitative transcribing and all of this is just so time consuming. So what we just saw was just a snapshot of your life.
Yes.
But thank you so much for sharing that. It's so interesting. So one of the things that I was wondering is if you've heard or seen or maybe know if individuals with brain injury have voiced concerns regarding appropriate posts in group specific contexts. So I'm in many groups and I often see, and this is in, people without brain injury, where they'll post something and I think, why did you put that in this group? That this is like a soup group. And, you like, don't post about your kids in a group about soup. And so, you see people kind of taking posts and putting them in places where they don't belong because there are kind of thematic rules. And because we know that individuals with brain injury struggle with that in social contexts, do you find that they acknowledge they struggle with that in kind of an online context?
My simple answer is yes and no. My much longer answer is many of the people that I've worked with brain injury struggle with figuring out what to post, just generally, let alone what to post where. And so there's lots of times where people have posted something and they've gone, oh, why is someone upset with me? Okay. And I mean, that's saying it very mildly. A lot of them have gone, these people have been really upset and distressed with what I've posted, and I'm really not quite sure why. Some have more awareness of why their family member or their friend is really upset by what they've posted, but a lot of the times they aren't told and people just kind of wither away. So there's kind of those two opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of responses that people get to inappropriate posts, right? There's the one where people are like saying in their face, this is inappropriate, you need to stop that. The other side of the coin is people just don't say anything and they don't interact and they get blocked and they don't know why. Both are really challenging for people with brain injury to respond to. And quite often they don't have people to support them through that. So in terms of the etiquette or rules in posting in groups, I think it's actually even more broader than just that group setting. I think it's just generally an issue in terms of figuring out what is appropriate, because that differs from individual to individual as well. And like you say, some people who don't have a brain injury do struggle with this as well. So I think even though we are more comfortable and familiar with using social media platforms for communication and connection, I don't know that we all explicitly know the rules. And the rules are different between individuals as well, because they're not written down anywhere.
No.
Maybe we need to write them down somewhere. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. It does. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, that just reminded me of what we've done with conversibility, which is a similar kind, and even right back to TBI Express, that thing of matching your communication to the situation. And that may well be a theme that emerges when you co-design your social ability intervention program, that there is a whole, because we know that people with brain injury can have difficulty doing that and being able to make that judgment about what should I do in this particular situation. And but we also know that they can learn that. So, we can highlight that and practice that. And so, it's a really good point, Nicole, that people may not be able to do that, but I really believe we can teach them how to do that. So that'll be something for the future work. I was interested, Liz, just in your, watch this space at the end with your peer moderated Facebook groups, which, I think is such an interesting new direction of intervention work in this area, in a safe space. I think people often think, oh, social media, it could all get out of hand. But I think the way you've set up this Facebook group with Brain Injury Australia, I think it's been such a fantastic way to engage safely in this area and see what can we do to train. And I just love all those different topics that you address through those Facebook groups. I was wondering if you could give a little bit of a future, what you're publishing in future about what the difference was between clinician and that peer, that the peer moderation is, I think, it has so much potential, and it's where we want to head. Were there differences, or are there any comments you can make about those two different conditions?
Yeah, I've got to say, for me, it was almost a really stark difference. Yes, the first two groups that we ran were really good. They were well received. Most of the participants found that it was really helpful, and they loved being connected with others and having that space to connect and practice and just chat. Some of the conversations that happened in the peer moderated group were just astounding. It wasn't led by me. It was led by our two co-investigators who had brain injury. Rachel and I were there to support. We kind of just did the logistics more than anything. But these two individuals really helped create this feeling of community. And they were talking from their experience. They helped others share their experiences, and the bonding that occurred in this group was definitely different to what we saw in the previous groups. And they've continued connecting after the group in ways that didn't occur with our first two groups. Yes, that could be due to group dynamics, but I think a really large part of it was because of the peer moderators, and that's come through in what the participants have been telling us in their interviews as well. So that's been probably the big thing that I've noticed that was quite lovely, and so well worth getting this up and running, which was tricky.
Yeah. Was there a lot of training involved with the peer moderators? I can imagine, it's not everybody would be able to do it or would want to do it, but
yeah,
because it sounds like they required some skill to be able to do what they were doing.
Yeah, absolutely. The two people that we had involved, Jimmy and Scoop, they have some experience in some smaller groups of peer moderation, so that are done locally and face-to-face. Scoop had already been supporting a group for some years as a community support group, and so he was able to bring that expertise as well. And Jimmy had been working with a smaller group in terms of designing programs to support others, so he brought that expertise with him as well, as just their knowledge of what it's like to live with a brain injury and going through the day-to-day. So that was really lovely. They definitely so when they came on board, we kind of said, how about we chat through what we've done and think about how you might like to do this. So Rachel and I kind of spent a couple of hours with them over a couple of weeks talking through what we'd done with the previous groups, which they'd experienced as participants, but they were now on the other side. And then we kind of went, what's going to work for you? What support are we going to be providing you? How is this going to work? And we kind of collaboratively came up with a plan of attack, so to speak, for the 8 weeks. And worked out what systems were going to support them in terms of remembering what they wanted to do that week, or getting some Zoom meetings set up. So in addition to the asynchronous Facebook groups, posting and things like that, we also set up some Zoom morning teas so that people could see each other's faces and have a little bit of a chat, and that opportunity to learn about one another in that synchronous way, which in a group of people with brain injury can be really challenging, but they really navigated supporting the individuals to be part of the group really quite well. And they both mentioned that was probably, it was a two-way street. It was really beneficial for them just as much as it was for the participants. Yeah. So there was training, but it was more working with them to figure out what's probably going to support them the best, and going from there. Yeah,
I like that. It was sort of like you're almost collaboratively co-designing the support, like it's giving them that empowerment to be able to let you know what would work for them.
Absolutely.
With or not comfortable with. I have one last question, and it just occurred to me when you were talking about knowledge hashtags, and how people improved in their ability to have knowledge of hashtags. I was wondering if you could describe why that's beneficial. Why would somebody's knowledge of hashtags help?
I mean, in terms of, the simple answer is, if you know what a hashtag is, you know how to use it and how to benefit from it. So if you know that if you put hashtag brain injury into the search function of most social media platforms, you will find all of the posts that have referenced brain injury. So you can search for information. The flip side is, if you know that if you put hashtag brain injury in your post, others who are looking for that information are going to see what you've posted. So it's kind of that two-way street. You can find information, but you can also help others find information. And then potentially you can also find others who are interested in that same topic to connect with over it. So I think having some knowledge about the functionality of social media can really help people to get the most benefit from using a platform.
Because I think it's an indirect way kind of to build your social networks, isn't it? Like it's a way to find your people in a place that may not immediately be obvious. How do I find other people with brain injury in X or on Mastodon or whatever platform that someone's on, Insta. So I think that was learning about hashtags for me was a bit of a revelation, because of it. I didn't quite get it to start with, because some people use a lot of hashtags and some people use so
it differs across platforms as well, how they're used.
You see a lot of hashtags in Insta. I've noticed Instagram. People have rows of hashtags. So well, I think we're just about out of time. We just had a clarification about whether this presentation was available. It will indeed be available. The recording of it will be available in due course, I think in the next few days. So we welcome people looking at the recording afterwards, and we'll be certainly sharing that via social media. I've got no doubt. So to finish up, Liz, I think I'd like to thank you very much for a really amazing presentation of your work. You're a trailblazer in this area. You're really leading the way internationally in this brave new world of social media, but I think it's such a critical part of rehabilitation that's been neglected. And so I'm very, very delighted that you were able to present for us this morning for IBIA, and for us to be able to distribute this work internationally. So thank you. Thank you for our attendees, and thank you for our excellent Secretariat, Jennifer Wiley, who has been hosting this for us today from IBIA's office in the US. So with that, I think I'll close off and say goodbye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.